Welcome back to Get Down to Business. We've got quite a treat in store for you. I've been planning this interview for a while. I'm thrilled to be joined by Major General retired Gregg Martin, Dr. Martin as well. He has a PhD, quite an impressive background and resume, as you'll hear about over the next few minutes. General Martin is a combat veteran, a bipolar survivor, an airborne ranger engineer, qualified soldier, and an Army strategist who served on active duty for 36 years until May 2015. General Martin, sir, it's an honor to have you on. Thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's really an honor to be on with you.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know you have a PhD, 2 master's degrees from MIT, master's degrees in national security strategy from both the Army and the Naval War College, bachelor's degree from West Point. So you certainly have quite the background. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your background, your experience, what led you into the Army, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of what led you out of the Army, if that's okay with you.
Sure. What led me into the Army was I came from a family with a strong military tradition. So my dad was a veteran, all my uncles were vets, and I just figured at some point I'm going to join the military and serve. And then when it came time to apply for college, I thought that the best college for the best price that I could find were the service academies. And so I applied and got accepted at West Point, and I went into West Point and then the Army really for the adventure, the education, the people, the fun, the danger, the excitement of the whole experience. So that's what led me in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you got all of those things and so much more. Did you ever think that you'd rise to the rank of a 2-star general?
No, never. When I got promoted from first lieutenant to captain, I thought that was the apex of my career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, look at that. It's incredible. You are an engineer. I know you served in the Army Corps of Engineers. You were the special assistant to the chief of engineers, working Corps future posture for 2025 and beyond. So it must be pretty exciting for you to now look from the outside. I believe you retired in Cocoa Beach, Florida, with your fantastic family. I know several of which have served themselves. Your wife is an Army brat, which they all deserve so much credit, which is great. And now you get to watch certainly those that you mentored, but also some of the work that you put in, which is pretty exciting. So again, I want to stick on the, we talked about what led you into the Army. I want to talk about your time in the service. Your resume is far too lengthy to go to detail in this conversation, but tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of your career, because we love to talk about service on this program.
Well, going to West Point was a real highlight. And of course, those 4 years were actually active duty time. So if you add them in, I was really in for active duty for 40 years, 40. Army Ranger School was a thrill, got to do that. Then I had a phenomenal time as a junior officer, as a platoon leader in charge of 30 soldiers, company commander in charge of about 150, and then on up the ladder, all the way, battalion commander, brigade commander, 1 and then 2-star general. So it was a tremendous experience. I had a huge advantage in that I was born with a bipolar brain, and I lived on the bipolar spectrum, which gave me extra energy, enthusiasm, drive, and it really enhanced my performance for years and decades until it went too high, and then it brought me crashing down and nearly killed me.
Absolutely. And that's where I want to go now. I know you served as the president of the National Defense University, and that's an incredible, prestigious assignment. So what was that moment where, again, what was an advantage turned into a disadvantage for you?
Well, there wasn't a particular moment. It was more of a gradual change. My onset of bipolar disorder was in 2003 during the Iraq War, and that's when I actually went into a state of mania. And then for the next 12 years, I started going into higher levels of mania, deeper levels of depression, and then psychosis came into my brain, which are hallucinations and delusions. So during this time, my conditions were unknown, unrecognized, undiagnosed. But by 2014, I had gone into what they call full-blown mania, which is a state of madness or insanity. So I went completely off the rails, over the top, out of control, reckless. I could, go into great detail like I do in my book, but that led to people finally realizing, hey, there's something wrong with General Martin. And so what they did is they wrote dozens of anonymous letters to my boss, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey. And they said, hey, we don't know what's wrong with General Martin, but here are some of the things we're seeing, and we're really concerned. So General Dempsey did an assessment, an investigation, and I got a call on a Friday saying, report to the chairman's office Monday morning at 10. So I went into his office. He strode across the office, gave me a big hug, and he said, Gregg, I love you like a brother. You've done an incredible job. I give you an A+, but your time at NDU is over. You have until 5 p.m. today to resign or you're fired, and I'm ordering you to get a mental health evaluation at Walter Reed. So essentially, that was the end of my career. I was, in essence, fired. I was forced to retire early, and then months later, I was admitted to a VA hospital in a locked psychiatric ward for hospitalization.
What an incredible story. And we're going to have the opportunity to continue this conversation. But again, I'm chatting with Major General retired Gregg Martin, who served on active duty for 36 years. But again, a graduate from West Point, quite an impressive background. He wrote an incredible book, which you can find out more details at generalgreggmartin.com. Gregg with 2 G's, Gregg Martin.com. We're going to continue our conversation with General Martin in just a moment. When we return, we're going to talk all about the bipolar general. You're listening to Get Down to Business. You can always get on my website, syklein.com. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Get Down to Business. We'll be right back. We're back on Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. I'm chatting with the author of a book. It's called Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness. It was published in September 2023 by Major General retired Gregg Martin, who's continuing my conversation with him right now. Again, sir, thank you again. So we were just talking in the conversation about your forced resignation in front of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Was that a surprise to you?
Yes, it was, because I had been in good communication with General Dempsey all along, and the feedback on the job I was doing was extremely positive, and we had a wonderful relationship. I had worked for him several times. But I will say this, General Dempsey is a great leader. He made exactly the right decision by getting me out of there. He probably saved my life. He probably saved me from a heart attack or a stroke, and he probably saved my marriage. So I really applaud his decision and thank him for what he did.
Absolutely. It's incredible. And the reason you wrote this book is obviously you were telling the story, and you're very open and candid about it right now. So we are talking on this program with business owners, entrepreneurs. Certainly, I hope that we've inspired folks with your service. Always all about encouraging folks to serve in some way, whether it's in uniform or not. Hopefully people hear your story, and we'll get to your website, which we'll send our listeners to in a couple of minutes. But why did you write this book? Why is it important that people hear the story of the bipolar general?
It's important because it could save their life. And not only the individual person reading the book, but members of their family, friends, work colleagues, people that they love. Because the book shares my in-depth experience going through a brutal bout with a deadly disease called bipolar disorder. And I lay it out. I don't pull any punches. I tell absolute truth. And so that knowledge and experience can be transferred to others and literally save their lives.
I want to go to the other side of it too. I'll call it what it is. There's been a stigma. There's been a stigma around mental health, and I think that's starting to change now. But as you've been having these conversations, what's the reaction that you've had? Are people surprised that you're willing to talk so openly about your challenges?
Yes, they are surprised, but the reaction is extremely positive, enthusiastic, and encouraging. But what you just said, the stigma is the biggest barrier to people going and getting help. And the stigma around mental illness is based on fear and ignorance. It makes no sense. There's no stigma surrounding cancer or diabetes because they're physical illnesses. but so too is bipolar disorder and other mental illness. They're physical in the biology of the brain. So it's completely illogical and unscientific to have any kind of a stigma surrounding this issue.
Absolutely. And again, as mentioned earlier in the program, you've not been persevering through this on your own. Your wife is an Army brat and a heroine for persevering through this, both your career in general, but also surviving and overcoming, again, this bipolar ordeal, which I know you've described as the toughest fight of your lives, which is saying a lot because you've commanded in combat. Again, the book, Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness, came out a few months ago. I am honored and excited to have you on this program. And I want to make sure we've only touched on the surface of your story and some of the lessons there, which involve, again, your story of battling bipolar disorder, which is saving lives and stopping the stigma. But again, Dr. Martin, Major General retired Gregg Martin, how can people get in touch with you and pick up a copy of the book?
They can get in touch with me through the website, which you gave already, but a simpler one is www.bipolargeneral.com, and you can connect with me on email through the website, which has tons of great information. The way to get the book, you can get it anywhere books are sold. Probably the simplest way is to go to the Amazon site and just click and order it there. Or you can go to my website, and on the landing page, there's 3 different sources to buy the book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and the Naval Press.
Fantastic. General Martin, thank you so much for joining us on the program and telling your story. We'll link in the show notes as well. That's a wrap for us here on Get Down to Business. To success, let's get down to business. We'll talk to you next Sunday right here. Have a great week.